And we didn't have any problem back from.
And I just got a
Change anything.
text message from
So,
Crow, and they are in, like, they're traveling and they are about to log on. They're going to be a couple minutes late.
That's totally fine. And Kay also let me know that they're not going to be able to stay the entire meeting. So thank you for that heads up, Kay. And I think they'll be here for 30 minutes, which we appreciate you being here at all, Kay. Thanks.
Oh, there's Hoon. Sorry, I was going to say that Hoon sent me a text saying they couldn't get on, but it looks like they've made it.
Just give another minute so that Crow can settle in. Not a problem at all. And then we can get started.
Well, that's happening. Can you guys believe it's already past the middle of February?
I've been like losing a little bit of sleep on all of the things that I'm like trying to push forward, but it's like, it's an insane amount of time that takes to do this work. So
For those who celebrate Christmas, it's only 44 weeks away. You're welcome.
Reminder, Jody.
I saw that as a meme the other day, and I'm like, I didn't need to know that.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Thanks for waiting for me for a couple minutes there. I just got back from dropping my wife off at the airport for a work training. So I didn't want to try to reschedule the meeting around that. So I knew it was going to be tight, but here I am if you want to do the roll call.
Sure. Pro Crosswhite, you are here. Olivia Dudo.
I'm here.
Elizabeth Johnson, I see you. Jody Tapper, I see you. Hoon Tran.
Here.
Thank you. Hi, Hoon. Kay Vincent, I see you. And Jasmine Wilder, I see you. You're all here. Again, just a reminder, Kay let me know that they're going to have to hop off early today. So appreciate that notification, Kay. Back to you.
Okay, next on the agenda is usually the minutes approval for last meeting. That's usually just a quick vote, or not even a vote, it's just an acknowledgement, approval of minutes. I think we did it show of hands last time, either virtually or visually. Let's see, 1, 2. I saw Jasmine raise a hand. 3, 4. All right. I think I counted enough. If anyone wants to confirm. Any objection? I guess there's not an objection thing. Sorry, my brain is not awake yet. And I left my smoothie downstairs. Back to a lot of attachments on this email, so we'll try to give everybody a lot of time to follow along today. So our goal today is mainly to solidify the final recommendations for leadership and then try to get through the rest of this government and guidelines document I'm gonna go to headphones so I can hear better. Okay. Jasmine, I know you sent me some emails while I was like on my errand. I didn't get a chance to read them. Is there anything from those that you want to start with or chat about?
Yeah, forgive me. I was trying to do that process where like the email process where you send written content for the document. So what it is it's the first one is the Martha's Rules adaptation. So it's potential language if we choose to, bring that in. I wrote down the language basically, so for everyone to look at. The other thing was just that wanting to provide guidelines for how the commission would make recommendations to the city council. And that's nothing but like a PDF showing that process that currently is in place, and just wanting HRAC to look at that and then provide a guideline so that it can act as a blueprint for commissioners in the future, because I feel like that's a huge part of what we will do. In the Martha's Rules ones, I made sure that it's clear that this could be adaptable. We can do other things. This is just how we are beginning. And I'd like to do the same thing with if we do the guidelines for making recommendations, that no one feels like we are, pinning them in or whatever. So those are the two things that I sent. And I don't know, it's up to you how you want to proceed.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is also on our agenda today, is to recommend some decision-making, potentially alternatives to Robert's rules to the committee as well. So someone has their hand up. Was it still up? I think it just went down. I think it was still up from before. All right, do we want to start with, I guess that's the other question, is do we want to start with decision-making process, because that might affect where we assign leadership on certain things, or does it make sense to just finish up our leadership? Any thoughts?
I don't see decision-making on the agenda. I see leadership structure, group dynamics, and final adoption of guideline documents. Did I not get?
No.
It was left off the official agenda for this one, but we did talk about it in our last general meeting. Let me bring back the agenda.
And I think Jasmine sent, we did talk about it in the last meeting, and then I think Jasmine sent today an example or some additional information around utilizing a less strenuous approach to making decisions. So kind of suspending or getting rid of Robert's Rules of Order, and in its place adopting the practice of Martha's Rules.
Okay, I haven't had a chance to review. I don't even have that, so.
Yeah, so I think basically we should not, that was just an additional content that I promised that I sent. So that's all that is. It doesn't have to be included in today's agenda.
Jasmine, when did you send that? I also don't have that. Or at least I don't have it pulled up.
So I sent it to Anna because I can't send it to you all. Oh, I sent it to Crow as well. And then the idea would be that it comes, that it comes back via Anna. That's how we have to collaborate.
Great. Okay, so it sounds like if we have time for that, that sounds like a good thing to explore. We'll stick to the agenda as it is for now. If we get to some group dynamics it's in part of the agenda, like 3A2. We might get to parts of that in there. So back to the leadership structure. I believe there's a document that was sent about our running notes so far.
I can share my screen. So.
Yes, please do. Oh, there it is. Yeah.
Do you see the document?
Yep.
Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
And I think just, I do think it's important to just note that, so we've had a couple conversations about what the leadership structure could be. I will say, I think sometimes when it comes to a governance and guidelines document, less can be more. And so if we want to kind of have a higher level definition of what some of the leadership or some of the responsibilities are for each of these positions, then we can also further define those best practices as a group, kind of as there's multiple policy vehicles, is I guess what I'm trying to say. So.
Mhm. And what we're also working with is we did vote in the last meeting to create these positions to be defined. So I think part of that right now is defining those positions. And if we could go back and review what those positions were in my notes, in general, I believe it was, I don't have my other meeting notes in front of me, like a communications lead. I think we also haven't solidified the language other than no more officer. And correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, potential new language here in the notes. Thanks for kind of hovering over that. Communications lead, safety peer relations lead. Oh, perfect. Here we go underneath. And was there a third one, or did we kind of get rid of that? Oh, the liaison. That's kind of a different potentially position because it's we talked about. I think a lot of people like the idea of rotating that potentially. I don't want to speak for everybody, but there was interest in a rotating position potentially, which is something we could talk about and recommend to do as well. So let's just start with communications. I think there was also a document where we could write out what we want from these positions, like a table document, leadership title, what I think this person does. I think we could maybe use that as part of a brainstorming for today too.
Yeah, so Crow, we had a member reached out and had an idea that they thought could be helpful just in kind of identifying individually what folks felt like each position was and what it wasn't, and really what this group is looking for out of those leadership roles. So I just went ahead, just kind of a skeleton document to help with brainstorming. That's what that was, yeah.
Yeah, let's bring that up maybe for today, and we can like just pop right in that because there are sections for each of these, and we can just start talking about as a group what we've talked about these positions doing, what we'd like them to do, and then we can get to a place where we can recommend the language to put into the document. Awesome, excellent. I think we can start with like communications and safety, these new positions, and then go back to the chair and vice chair at the end, since those kind of have meat to them already. I have that up. Let's see. I'm gonna have my handwritten notes in front of me. All right. Again, we're a small group, so if you want to just pop in and talk about ideas, what do we think the communication lead does? To start off, we've talked about, and this ties into some of Jasmine's side work and research, is to work facilitating communication, either externally or internally. So what does facilitating communication mean and look like?
I missed last session Is
Mhm.
this different or like augmenting the communications subgroup in any way? Are these
Um,
two connected?
Yeah, I believe in the beginning we sort of talked about yeah, having communication with the communications subcommittee.
I guess like would this person lead that subcommittee or lead like external presentation of HREC?
Can I provide a little context, Crow?
Yes, please.
Okay, so this came out of, I don't think, Olivia, to your point, I don't think that this person necessarily is leading that group. I think we felt like it was more of communicating internally within the group. If folks have questions like, hey, I missed that meeting, what was talked about there, then they have a person that kind of can help identify that. The other thing is with the recommendation process for this group elevating recommendations to council, there will be a lot of drafting of language. And so I think this would be the person that is taking the feedback from the conversation. Similarly, Olivia, to how you did with a statement on Barry Washington Jr., you were typing away as the group was having open discussion about what this language should be. So kind of just having that scribe of the group, somebody who's drafting the actual recommendation memo that will be going up through me to council for consideration, but ultimately capturing the thoughts of the entire group. And I think similarly being the person when we do have those moments where community is impacted by something and HREC wants to make a statement, that having that person already be identified to do that communication kind of drafting. So that's kind of where this came from.
Got it.
Great. So I'm hearing words like scribe or secretarial or like memo sort of thing, or like it's not like general minutes, but it's oh, I don't know what I want to say, like a concentrated, no, specific, potentially when we want to think about communicating with a city council or potentially externally. I also heard word internal. We talked a lot about internal communication. And I think that is really what differentiates this communications lead from the communications subcommittee.
This is Elizabeth. I just have a couple of things. It looks like we already have a handful of these things already written up in this draft form. Can we maybe?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I just wonder if we're just redoing the whole thing all over again, or if kind of like what Anna had said earlier about sort of taking a high level look at this and then digging into details, you know, kind of as we evolve the positions themselves. Or do we need to define all of this again now?
I think our purpose here today is to brainstorm an official recommendation. We do have what we have written out here. I'll read it out now. We have an A, B, and C currently for the communications lead to work with the chair, vice chairs, and city staff to draft official recommendations from the HREC to city council. B is to work with city staff and HREC members to gain feedback on city communications as needed. And C, work with chair, vice chairs, and city staff on content development as needed for briefings to city council and other tasks within HREC's scope, which is, yes, Elizabeth, exactly what we're talking about, this kind of memo taking. Yeah. Maybe that is a better place to start, Elizabeth. Thank you. Is there anything we want to add to that?
And the interpreters are switching.
Thank you. This, I think the important thing to think about is there is a little bit of potentially confusion about how is the communications lead different from or work with or relate to our subcommittee currently. How do we make that clear within this government and guidelines? Or do we want to keep it somewhat vague so that we as a community of people can figure out what that means and what it needs to mean as we go.
I see Ian has his hand up, Pro.
Thank you. Just a quick comment, hopefully helpful on this question. The subcommittees that you currently have, they may be things that continue, they may not. This particular subcommittee, once this work is done, my, I guess, anticipation would be that this subcommittee would no longer meet. So that's just an intro to saying, I don't know how you think of the communications subcommittee, but it may be that that doesn't continue and beyond a certain point, and then the communications lead doesn't, I mean, there's really nothing for them to sort of fit with or be distinguished from. So I just wanted to make that point. I don't know how HREC members are thinking about these subcommittees, but they may not go on forever, depending on whether you think they need to continue or not.
Thank you for that. That is good context to have. Like, this is a permanent way to kind of voice what we want and need for communication within HREC. Yeah, some of that, I think, really the heart of it, I think, was making sure there is a space in our community to be a point contact between people, whether it is individuals or different subcommittees or like even the city. And there, I think I see a hand up. You can go ahead if you want to speak. I think.
So it's Hung, and bringing that up, it just made me think of like, are we also going to add onto this like the terms for each role, just to give people opportunities to step up if they want to too, depending on their bandwidth and interests and stuff.
Thank you, Hung. I am on my iPad, so I can't see as many features as normal. Good question. I think above, if we scroll up on this document, this does have terms of office for chairs, which I think we're talking about making this is basically a chair level position. So I think this maybe applies, but we can talk about if it needs to be different for these other positions. But yeah, this covers all the officers as it appears right now.
This is Elizabeth. I think for myself, I had, that's a great question. I had considered that these additional, the communications lead and the safety or peer relations lead, I had just anticipated, I guess I assumed they were going to be annually similar to what the chair and vice chair were, but I had some thoughts around the city council liaison that I was waiting to discuss when we get to that position.
Yeah, I think that might be a little bit different. But so I think potentially we should talk about, is the city council liaison like an officer position? Should it be in this A section here for purposes of term limit? Personally, I think that it makes sense for all officers to have like an equitable term.
This Elizabeth again, sorry. I had looked at this last night pretty closely and figured my thoughts on the city council liaison position was that not necessarily would it be up under your section A as leadership. I do, however, like the idea of giving folks the opportunity. I don't necessarily know how we would break that down or if everyone in the commission is going to want the same opportunity. So my thought had been is if we broke it down into chunks of time. And what I looked at was we have 6 members who are currently, if we go with chair, vice chair, and the 2 lead positions, then currently with our 3 vacancies, we have 6 positions that are not assigned to a specific task. And so if we were to break it down by those 6 members all having an equal time, it's 2 months appointment starting this month. So everybody would have 2 months of time to be doing the city council liaison position. Otherwise, if we wanted to break it, make it even more consistent for folks, because I feel like if I was only doing a month worth of city council meetings, I feel like as soon as I got involved into something and started reporting back on something, it would be time to switch. And so I feel like 1 month would be too short. That's why I kind of came up with the 2 months. But also if we stretch it out even more to 3 months, which is more of a responsibility for folks and more of a time commitment, then it comes down to 5 members. So I feel like that gives people an opportunity to sign up and to agree to do this, but it may not give everyone the opportunity.
I love how you're thinking of breaking this down. It does sound like it does need to be a slightly different, but we do want it to be potentially like elevated to the same level of importance as these other like chair positions, even though it is kind of a temporary or rotating position. So maybe it does belong in this section with a little note. You know, term limit shall be this, with the exception of the rotating liaison.
Crow, this is Megan. Could I interject for just a second here?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Yeah, Elizabeth, I think that makes a lot of sense. That was sort of one of the things I was thinking of is, you know, a lot of the times, particularly with our council meetings, we'll have something at a work session, one meeting, and then, you know, it comes back a couple of meetings later, or, you know, something similar to that. And so I think, you know, yeah, maybe not rotating once a month, but on a sort of maybe quarterly basis or something like that would also give that individual time to really sort of, you know, develop, you know, a lot of sort of knowledge of what's going on with the council, because it is, you know, it was a learning process for me, and it would be a learning process for them as well. And I was also thinking that, you know, under sort of like what this position is and isn't, if we could include something about, you know, having a quick meeting with me before or after the meeting to kind of, you know, talk through what happened or what is about to happen, you know, at the meeting. Just a thought.
Yeah, debriefing duties sound great. I do see a couple more hands up. Let's get through some of those. I don't know who popped up first. You just want to chat if anyone has something super relevant.
Thanks. It's Hung, and I love Elizabeth's idea of breaking it up time for the rotating part. I also think it's a great idea because as we transition to the next rotating person, there's that opportunity to have a little bit more bonding and get to know each other, which I think is that trust building that we really need to have in our group. So allowing, you know, whoever's going to do this as they transition to be able to talk with other members to say, hey, this is my experience, this is what's going on, kind of debriefing like Megan was saying, I think will be also beneficial as our commission as a whole in the long term. So I really love the breaking up and rotation ideas.
Thank you, Hung. I think there were 2 important parts in there. That debriefing is important both with the city liaison and with the new members that will rotate into that position. Olivia.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So our objective for the day is to get these, I guess, job descriptions near as close as we can to final, ultimately to get us to elections next meeting. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
We also have an objective to try to get through the rest of the governance and guidelines document. Okay. Our goal is to try to get it done through that. This meeting was our original goal was 3 meetings, but we'll do our best.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering, like, what does good look like here? Is
Mhm.
this enough for us to like have people throw their hats in the ring?
Yeah, I think it's almost enough. I think if we just just go through each position a little bit, make sure it's the work Anna has done to aggregate our ideas represents what we want, I think. Yeah, I think there was one more question I had about this city council liaison, Elizabeth, when you were thinking about it, and then when we were chatting about it before, we talked about the idea of making this potentially a buddy system, like have two people rotating in. Did you think about that in your calculations? Like the math was hard for me to think of just off the
No,
top.
I did, and I actually considered, there's a couple of different ways that we can go about this. What I anticipated or what I envisioned seeing is this being like folks signing up essentially for the terms, because if we break it down into 2 months, then it's like February, March, April, May, June, July. But if we go in quarters, then it's 3 months, which is a very nice consistent number. 3 months, I could myself personally could agree to doing 3 months worth of city council meetings. They do have some varying amounts of responsibility for time, because I've seen some of the city council meetings where they get done, fairly soon, that they're on time, but I've also seen them go quite long into the night. So it's a varying responsibility. So I think having some sort of buddy system is probably a good thing. But I also had thought that it would be hard to get two people to sign up for the same quarter. And then I don't know, the first thing that I landed on was if you're not going to be able to attend. So if I was not going to be able to attend a city council meeting, I would want to have some sort of an alternate person that I could tag first to see if they could attend. And what I envisioned was that would be the person who had just previously done the same role. So if I take the first quarter and say, just for example, Jody takes the second quarter, Jody can't attend one of the meetings, he would tag back to me because I would probably be familiar with what's happening in the council meetings because I was just there. And so it would be the previous person would be the first one you could tag. And if that same instance, Jody wouldn't be able, Jody would reach out to me, say we both couldn't go, then we would be reaching out to leadership from HREC to say, hey, neither one of us can go. Is there someone else we can assign? So that was just my first thought, but I'm sure there's lots of different ways that this can be done.
I like that, Elizabeth. That put some accountability onto us in these roles.
Can I ask a clarifying question for myself? I think this is great feedback. Thank you, Elizabeth, for outlining that. I think it landed with me clearly. Is it safe to say the recommendation that this group is making right now is that all positions aside from the liaison position will be on an annual basis, and with the council liaison position, and this is maybe a question for Ian and then larger consideration and approval of the group. Is it safe to give us some wiggle room and say members will serve in this role on a rotating basis? And outside of this document, this group is saying we're on a quarterly basis. I think in the future, I'm thinking 5 years down the road, if folks are like, they decide they want to serve, in a 6-month increment or a month by month, that they'll have the flexibility to do that without having to go back and change the governing document. Or Ian, what would you recommend that how I word this here based off of the?
So I think some flexibility is a good idea. The only positions that are really required to sort of be selected and changed over in a certain time in a certain way are the chair and vice chair, because that's what the code says. So for these other positions that the commission is creating, you can establish your own cycle, your own process. And I think if you have some flexibility in the document, which gives me an opportunity to say something about the guidelines document, that's not a bad idea. You can make changes or rotate people in by motion at an HREC meeting if that's something you want to do. So one comment in terms of process, because this came up earlier, I was probably hoping for a better chance to mention it. But in terms of sequence of this process, what you're doing is working on positions and sort of position descriptions that are going to go in the guidelines document. So I do think it's important to get to a point where you have a complete and then adopted guidelines document by the entire commission before you go through a process or hold elections to fill these positions. So I wanted to reiterate, I think we talked about that sequence at the last meeting or maybe the last subcommittee meeting. So I wanted to just maybe make that point that I think it is important to get the guidelines document completed and adopted by the entire HREC before you actually go through the selection process and establish who's going to fill these positions.
Okay, thank you for that feedback. I do like, I did mention before, like keeping that some stuff a little bit vague is sometimes to our benefit. I think that we could add on a rotating basis or like maybe something like voluntary to signify that this isn't like an assigned or voted upon role, but like something that you can volunteer for if you feel like you have the capacity. It's not something that like everyone has to do this type of thing. Okay. I feel like that does, I feel like we've answered most of the questions about the liaison position, at least kind of the ones that I had. I do like the idea of just saying it is on a rotating basis because we can talk about and take recommendations from members in meetings, like Elizabeth's excellent thought process about quarterly, and it can also change with what makes sense potentially with the city council calendar. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but the way it matches up or the way that they vote on projects, I know they do annual budgets, that type of thing. It might in the future become a thing that there's a natural time limit for those. So oh, I keep trying to touch my screen like I can scroll through this document on my own. All right. I think what we were talking about the communications lead. What we haven't talked about at all yet is this safety and peer relations lead.
That's my first question, Crow, for this group is what do we want to officially call this? I think there's been some thought, but I don't know that I've heard like complete buy-in from this group on, do we want peer relations lead or do we want kind of safety lead or the way that it is now?
This is Elizabeth again. I like the way it's written right there myself, just because it does give that connotation of safety, which is one of what I anticipated was being one of their primary duties is that they're, keeping the environment, the atmosphere safe for not only the members, but the folks who are calling in and such, but also the peer relation piece so that we know that they are someone that, you can reach out to if you feel you've been harmed in some way and work through that process with them. So I like the way it's written just like that.
And just to react to Elizabeth there, I do too. I would be hesitant to just call it a safety lead because people's definition of safety is just so nebulous sometimes. And I like what Elizabeth just said there about the safety peer relations. So it's pretty clear that it's about people safety.
And the interpreters have switched.
All right, thank you, interpreters, for all the work you do. what was I gonna say? Safety peer relations lead. Yeah, the only thing I have in my notes that we talked about just kind of like internal facilitation, peer-to-peer communications, which is all already kind of in that definition. We've got our term limit. And I feel like it gives enough direction, but also flexibility. Work with commissioners to support them. In safety peer relations B, it says work with commissioners to support them when safety becomes a concern. Do we want to say also the director, or because I feel like that relations part means potentially advocating for a commissioner to larger city leadership, just as an example.
It's Hung. I definitely agree with that. I was going to say this person can definitely help also support director or any person of contact we need with the city, because ultimately we're also here to support their success too. So I really love that idea.
I'm wondering too, thank you, Lynn, for that. I appreciate that. And I'm wondering too, like in the future, would this group want this person to also maybe be the point on, so like, for example, part of the charge of this group is to create an avenue for community members to raise complaints of discrimination. And I know that is some of the work that the communications subcommittee is working on and is something that we want to put in place. So I'm just thinking when that happens, is it something when it comes in, it goes to me and I immediately reach out. My first step is to reach out to this person to support the coordination between the groups, or maybe we could just have this stay the way that it is now and make that change when we have that process in place and kind of assess what that process looks like.
This is Elizabeth.
Oh yes, please, Elizabeth, go ahead.
Sorry, I like the thought of looking down the road at this a little bit, but I could almost see that duty being something that goes either to both or one or the other of both the communications and that safety peer relations, because there's going to be a communication aspect to what happens when that complaint comes in, and how is that communicated both to the HREC, and then how is the information, once it's taken in, absorbed and addressed in whatever way needs to be addressed, how is it communicated back to the community as a whole? So I could see that being probably a tag team of effort between that safety and the communications person.
Maybe let me walk that back a little bit, and just, I think what I'm hearing, or what maybe feels best, is that we move forward with identifying these positions. And I think that process might need to be sussed out a little bit more when we have an idea of what that looks like. So continuing the practice of, as those come into me, I'm sharing them out with the entire commission and giving you all a summary of what my actions are to address it.
Hung, I saw your hand go up. Do you have a comment?
Yeah, this is for later on discussion, but since Anna brought it up, with those emails getting sent out to all of us, are we going to figure out when, as a group, we're going to discuss the stuff that does happen in the community that we're receiving as a whole group itself? So, yes, I understand communications lead and a safety lead will be the leads we will lean on to for this. But, when we get those emails, it's kind of like, okay, so when do we get to talk about this? This is not for discussion right now. It's just something that we hope will be in the notes for later when we get to that topic, so we can discuss further what's going to be our process.
Thank you for that. That's interesting. It made me think of like, Yeah, like part of this document can build in sort of protections for our community as a whole and as a micro community of commissioners. I wonder if there's value to adding some sort of debriefing language to the safety peer relations lead as well, so that they are empowered to have time to bring safety concerns to the commission. Any thoughts?
I love that idea.
Yeah, same. I was gonna say, I thought that's great.
And then I think that that can stay, again, kind of ambiguous, because we can decide maybe we want an annual report, maybe we want a report every meeting. We can kind of decide as a group easier what that means and what we need that to mean for us as it comes up. Because, you know, there might be some times that feel less safe than other times. So, wow, good discussion, y'all. It feels that this is feeling good. I feel like we have a really good kind of hashed out, I don't know if that's the right word, a good skeleton of positions to present to the commission so far. Did I see your hand go back up, or is it still up from?
Yeah, I had another thought when you were talking about that, just how we talked about in our last meeting, you know, bringing up to help the community ways to de-escalate or how to disrupt something when they see as a community member, how to approach things. And I recall communications is talking about something like that. Maybe this role can also assist with, you know, whatever that program is going to look like for the community.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as well. It's like, would it be helpful to have language in both the communications and safety peer relations lead works with kind of a general works with the, you know, the larger plan of I don't know, what is the wording, citizen complaint process, I guess, or citizen reporting process. My words escape me. Someone said better words earlier.
Yeah, I wouldn't say citizen because that's kind of a barrier.
Yeah, the brain. Accountability, the public accountability process. Those are the words that make the most sense, I think.
So I just want to make sure that I'm capturing the language that this group feels is most appropriate, also given like that flexibility piece. So how would you, this point D, how would you all want me to word that specifically? Work with the larger leadership group
to manage the public accountability process. It's escaping me. Maybe someone can remind us. You know, there at the beginning of the charter of this commission, there was a goal to create a process for the public to bring concerns.
Yeah, to create
about
for the public to be able to raise complaints of discrimination.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that wish I had that language in front of me. Yeah.
I have it. I have it
Thank
here
you.
if you provide opportunities for people seeking resolution and assistance regarding complaints of discrimination in Bend, including potential violations of the city's equal rights ordinance. HREC may connect people with resources and assistance and seek resolution of complaints through conciliatory or educational processes, but does not have the authority to compel participation, require specific actions, or impose economic sanctions or other penalties. So that's what it says under our ordinance there, but I don't know what pieces you want to pull out for this.
I think that a lot of that development is under this communication subcommittee as far as like creating those pathways. So it might be also appropriate for the communications lead to be.
Yeah, and that's something we want
executing
to
that.
tackle on our next agenda too.
I'm sorry, Olivia, was that you? You want to talk about that in your next communication subcommittee agenda?
Yeah, I guess the handling of those submissions, because we've had discussions multiple times about how like either we create a much more streamlined HREC website that allows for people to submit, similar to like the example Shireen brought up with the UN, where you can submit instances of discrimination, you can submit, things for HREC feedback. And that's something we want to talk about next time we meet in terms of the larger like website design project that's happening at the city.
Excellent. Thank you for that context. Yes, having it in both of those positions, because we want to empower both the communications lead and the safety peer relations lead to be included in that process once we figure out what that process is. So the language as it is now is work with the larger leadership group and equity and inclusion director to manage the discrimination complaints process. Sounds good to me so far. All right, let's go back and look at the macro of these positions here. We've looked at communications lead, safety, peer relations, city council liaison. These are positions that we voted upon in our last large group meeting as things that should exist. We are now working on definitions for that to vote upon, to include in the final draft language of our governance and guidelines. So that is our large context. We did talk about term limits. To wrap up, I think this discussion, is there any discussion we wanted to talk about as far as the leadership, the duties of leadership for chair and vice chair? Because we skipped that part to focus on the last three. As well as, is there any first of all, are there any comments regarding the three leadership positions we talked about? Anyone, side note, had to say before we potentially recommend this to the larger group? I should look at for hands. Okay. I'm not seeing hands. So let's circle back to chair and vice chair. Is there anything we wanted to add to that? I don't recall really chatting about, I think the only thing I recall is chatting about potentially adding another vice chair, but then we kind of went into these other positions instead.
I feel like this is a good place to start. My personal concern with adding more like leadership positions is, to Elizabeth's point, then we have fewer people that can rotate in for either like council, seatings, or just like general voting members.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Huang. So just for clarification, if you have any of these roles, then you can't rotate to be a city council liaison?
That's a good question. And I don't think that it does preclude people. I think that maybe our logic was maybe these other chairs have so many duties that they might not want to volunteer for this, but in the language of our liaison, it is voluntary. I think that potentially anybody could join if anybody has any objections, but I think that I'm probably speaking for Elizabeth here, but I think that her thought was probably that the liaison is a rotating position. It creates maybe, I'm just speaking for myself now. The city council liaison to create equity within the commission creates a position for people who don't have these other chair positions to have like a leadership role. So I think we were talking about it as if those were the only people who could fill those roles. But yes, I believe that, the vice chair, the communications lead, the safety peer relations lead could sign up to be a person if they wanted to. But I am assuming that some people might not have the capacity for that, or just simply don't really want to. Is that clear in our language if we scroll down to there? Because we added voluntary potentially. Oh, there it is. On a rotating basis. Yeah.
My advice here would be just to not build an additional language specific to say like anybody can, and just have kind of a normal understanding that, it doesn't preclude anybody from participating or for volunteering for this. I think it just says depending on membership capacity. So if folks are feeling at capacity given other leadership roles, they're likely not going to participate or want to volunteer here, but it still allows for them to do that if they do have capacity and want to get involved.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's an interesting position when you think about like it's the one that's not really voted upon. It's everybody is eligible for it because we have been appointed to this commission. I'm just taking a pause to think about if the language here fits that. This is like, I think that the litmus test will be when we bring this to the larger council. If they're confused by this, maybe we'll vote we could potentially vote or to change that language a little bit to serve what we need. But thank you, Hung.
This feels good for at least our next session.
Yeah, thank you, Hung, for pointing that out, that it isn't limited to people who are not chairs in other positions.
And the interpreters are going to switch now.
Thank you.
I have highlighted here, Crow, a piece that I am unclear about. I have a note from previous conversation under duties of leadership for chair and vice chair. So just thinking through kind of, there was like mild conversation is how I would describe it, around kind of having both the chair and vice chair shall work together to facilitate meetings. I didn't know if we wanted to open that up or if you want me to get rid of it or where we're at with that.
Thank you for bringing that up. As the vice chair, it feels weird to kind of speak on it. But yeah, I think part of that conversation was talking, like we're defining and empowering people to take care of each other. I think it's the heart of this conversation. I don't see why it shouldn't be included. Work together to facilitate meetings. Why not? I mean, the benefits to this language to me are that, Jasmine maybe now feels empowered to say, hey, I don't have capacity for this meeting. Will you run this meeting? Or will you run this section of the meeting? Or like to share that power or that responsibility and be empowered to do so within our governance and guidelines. Those are my immediate thoughts. I would love to hear other people's thoughts.
Well, this is Elizabeth. I just have a question because I mean, we're brand new, so you guys are the first to jump in and take it for the team on this, but I don't know if you guys have a process currently for debriefing afterwards or getting together and discussing prior to how the meeting is going to be facilitated and the ideas that you want to bring forth. But going forward, I could see that if I was in one of these positions, that would be something that would be beneficial to me. Sort of having that conversation as a team to say, this is kind of the direction that everybody wanted to go. How can we together make it so that it really goes in that direction? So I guess my thought is I like that piece added in there.
Same. Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, in my brain, I'm just trying to think what would be the like a negative to adding this language, and I'm not really thinking of any. It is general enough to work with in the future, but also empowering enough to create a better relationship between the chair and vice chair. And to answer your question, Elizabeth, we don't currently have a process for that. I think we're trying to work on one. I've been super busy with grad school, so that's mostly my fault. But Jasmine has been in the process of trying to create those meetings with me for debriefing. And it looks like she has a comment.
Yeah. Yes. So we do have a process. I think that we're still filling it all the way out. But I was thinking for this language, we could add actually and say, so both the chair and the vice chair shall work together to facilitate meetings and execute the needs of the desires of the full commission or something, because I do think that that does happen. And I also feel like the director is involved in that too. So it's the three of us.
Mm-hmm. I like the language as it is right now, Anna, because it leaves us room to figure out if we want a separate meeting, or if it leaves it flexible. Were you about to say something?
I was just thinking, so I've noticed some places throughout the document, it says like with city staff, and then some places we have with the equity and inclusion director. And I'm just wondering if we want to just be consistent, and do we want to put just city staff or the equity inclusion director? The thing that I will say is, I mean, with city staff, it just leaves flexibility for like if the title changes, or I think just it could be if I'm gone out on family leave, you're working with my manager. So I'm just thinking about that piece of like, it doesn't really matter to me. Would you all like city staff or equity and inclusion director?
What about city staff liaison? So like it's whoever is the city staff liaison, which likely is the director, but potentially could be someone else.
I like that, considering we had started without a official director. There's potential.
Through the entire document and just make that change as well. And so just in terms of next steps too, like I'll go through this and have Ian's final thoughts as well. Turn all the red black, and once this group feels good, and I'll plug it into that bigger document. So you'll see it show there, and then I'll send it out to you all. But I'll also just go through and make sure that like there's consistency. We're just saying city staff liaison.
That sounds good to me. And then as far as the plans for potentially like the next meeting, we're getting close to the end of, I think, our scheduled time for today. We end at 1 today, is that correct? I'll pull up my agenda. Oh, let me see everybody, gather review, there we go. As far as going forward, the larger commission has already voted upon creating these positions. I think for time purposes, we could potentially wait to vote on the entire document. I think as Ian was maybe alluding to earlier, as we do have a couple more sections to go through, and our goal is to have a vote of like a complete document that we can vote upon. Yeah, if that sounds good to everybody. So in the next like large committee meeting, we'll say like we've created these job descriptions. We could maybe present them to people to think about, and then keep plugging away at our document and get something big to vote on. Because like our main goal is to get to vote upon the entire governance and guidelines document so that we have something to work with to go forward.
What do we have for the last 20 minutes of this meeting?
There is nothing, there's just there's staff update and a discussion about the next subcommittee meeting left on the agenda. If there's a staff update, we can do that. If not, I think we could transition to a little bit of discussion about decision-making process if we want to try to recommend that to the committee as well.
So this is Elizabeth. I just have a question. I'm just wanting to know, am I hearing you right? We're going to put off any sort of adoption of the governance guidelines policies until we meet again next month?
It looks like it, just for time purposes. It looks like we're not going to get through the entire document.
What are the sections that are left? I know we committed to having this document ready to look at for our upcoming meeting.
Yeah,
and so I don't know
well,
how
that
much
was our
editing
goal.
is required left.
There is the committee conduct and meetings, which kind of goes into decision-making process, and it talks about a little bit of Robert's rules, which might be a larger
Which I
discussion.
know the communications group started that section. We should have edits. I think Anna has them.
I do have edits for that. So communications did take a section of this document to work on. And I think the group, they're meeting tomorrow. We're meeting tomorrow. And I think the idea is that they'll have that section complete after that meeting for recommendation. So I do think there's value in continuing the conversation to get as much done today as possible. And what I can do is suspend my director's report and put that in an email and send it to you all. I do have, it's minimal updates, but I just more situational awareness stuff of what I'm working on.
Thanks, Anna. I appreciate that myself. This is Elizabeth again. And I think that, you know, kind of alluding to what Olivia might be saying is I feel like we should push through because we've already kind of put this up a couple of times. And it also has this very lovely piece at the very end of the guidance document that says we can amend the document. If needed.
Yeah.
So just an idea that we could go back and change it. I just think we should have something that we can present to the larger group so we can start moving forward.
Absolutely. I also have some time to stay a little bit later than we can get it done if we have a quorum. I believe we do. It's hard to tell now because I forget who is all on this committee.
Yeah. So can we pull that up, and then to Anna's point, we can skip over the meeting conduct one since the comms group will finalize that tomorrow.
Awesome. That is section 7. And Jasmine, I believe you're part of that group, so your information will get to us eventually. Is that correct?
Yes, we also agreed that we would bring the decision-making process to the whole group, so we don't necessarily need to, we could send it out via email. We can discuss it in the main meeting and get that, get a version committed.
Awesome, thank you. So we will get all that information for what looks like section 7, if I'm doing my Roman numerals correctly. Thank you for that. So that brings us to section 8, which is called HREC topics and recommendations. Just a reminder, the highlighted is stuff that is in the code that is potentially very harder to change, but not set in stone. Just something we would have to ask the city to change. So I'm going to give everybody a second to just kind of check this out.
And so that section B, is that, Jasmine, where you're thinking of slotting in Martha's rules?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So I guess we
Recommendations.
table
Great.
that section until we vote on
Cool.
Martha's rules.
So section 7 and 8 is kind of being taken care of by our communications subcommittee. Thank you for that work. That leaves us 3 small sections left at the end. Communications and records, which is pretty much all highlighted. It's pretty straightforward. Legalese, keeping records stuff. Then there's ethics. Ethics might be an important section that we want to chat about a little bit. Let's look at the language of it. Most of it is highlighted, adhering to the standards and procedures in ORS 244. What isn't highlighted is the section HREC values open discussion, including the airing of questions about actual and potential conflicts, and relies on that discussion to ensure transparency and trust. Do we like that? Do we want to add more to that? Open discussion, transparency, and trust. I'm trying to think back to the times we have like flagged little pieces, little blind spots of ours in our language. What are our ethics, y'all? I do like transparency and trust and open discussion. Those are great words. There are words from the Allyship in Action report as well that always pop out to me. Those words are like shared power and accountability. Pop up see if there's any hands up. I see a hand up. There's Jasmine. Hi, Jasmine. Do you have something to say?
Oh, yes. So it was a developing thought because I agree maybe we should add some of the language from Allyship in Action, but I was going to say that when it comes to ethics, we do have expanded sections in communications, like our communications agreement, and then also in Martha's rules, since that's our decision-making process. There's potentially some added language too around, how we discuss things, how we bring things forward, and how we, treat one another. So I was just going to say there is some detail in this document around that, but then maybe we could ask, like in a response to what you just said, maybe we could ask the city to grab some of the language from Allyship in Action and add it to the ethics section if they feel, if there's appropriate parts.
So let me just double check for hands. Hung, you have a comment?
Yeah, I was thinking too with the ethics, I do like adding in that accountability and shared power, like you were saying, and I can't think of the word right now, but it's like gently disrupting, type of language. And I really think this section could be put in, I guess, kind of one of the roles, or in the description of the roles for maybe the safety and peer lead, as in like this is part of what you're going to be leaning a lot on is the ethics piece of our governance, or possibly can we add in our ethics what we can lean on? Can we make like a DEI statement that is going to be our foundation of what ethics is, so we have something to lean on if someone does create harm or does something. We were like, hey, we're just going back to our foundation here. This is our statement this is what we agreed on to be on this commission. This is the statement we've created, just so there's a little bit more accountability when we're like, hey, but let's look at this. So then the leads have something to show and say, hey, this is why we're accountable. This is what we agreed on. Something like that.
Excellent feedback. I think I had a thought that I lost a little bit in my brain just now. My question was, anyone from the communications subcommittee, I feel like maybe they are creating an ethics document, or maybe could potentially create an ethics document. Maybe we could add in that language, HREC ethics follows the current communications recommended ethics guidelines, or something like that, to empower our communications subcommittee, or whatever our I guess we'd have to answer that question first.
We have had a similar discussion in the communications group when we were talking about conduct, because a lot of the ethics then become sort of more action oriented in the conduct section.
And I can't raise my hand because I'm sharing my screen, but I'm also wondering what the difference. So I think, to me, ethics, this piece is more around, I'm connecting it to state law. And I think I'm hearing is like around group norms and how we're going to treat each other and conduct business as a team. And there is a separate section, and I know communications is doing a lot of that. And so I'm also wondering if there's an opportunity to just have folks after this meeting provide feedback or their thoughts, maybe directly to me. And then I can kind of collate those for the meeting tomorrow to talk through building in the considerations from this group into that language. I don't know, just throwing that out there. And I saw, Ian, you had your hand up, but I think you put it down. So
yeah, I was going to offer something a little bit similar. In this section 10 ethics, the highlighted stuff, that's just state law, public official ethics stuff, that is what it is. But I think what I'm hearing is we're also talking about values. And so to me, separating them might make sense. I mean, if section 10 was called ethics and values, and then we had the highlighted paragraph, which again, state law ethics, and then a paragraph that identifies or speaks to some of those foundational principles or values, which, state law doesn't tell you what those are. That's up to the commission. So that might be one way to think about it, because I think we're talking about values as much as legal ethics.
Excellent. I like that you separated those paragraphs. Awesome. I think that some of this discussion has already potentially been had by the communications subcommittee, and that we can leave room for discussion from that subcommittee when we talk about voting on the larger draft, because there is some room for that, because communications is going to essentially present on a couple of these sections, and it looks like they have kind of 7 through 10 worked through a bit. So I feel confident in the work that they've done, and that I will get that information in the larger meeting. And I do think that our our goal here is to kind of outline our group ethics and solidify that in our governance and guidelines. Just a little bit dependent on the things that our communication subcommittee presents to us and that we vote upon. Great. Are there any other comments? Because the last section is the one that Elizabeth mentioned, that we can change stuff. So if we don't have any more comments, then we're essentially through this document. I believe Anna will kind of aggregate our information today as she's done as we've gone through it, and then we'll rely on our communication subcommittee for sections 7 through 10.
My only comment is congratulations to us. Good job, Crow.
We did it. We met our goals. Even with
We should
some
celebrate.
changing. Yeah, we changed
celebrate.
up some members and we still met our goals. Thank you for all the work everybody's done. The last things on our agenda today are, I think, still the staff update. I don't know if there was an official staff update to get through. Let's do that.
Cool. First, I just want to acknowledge, I think we talked about shared power, and I just want to make the very clear connection of this is not a leadership structure that the city currently has for any advisory group, and it is exactly connected to shared leadership. So appreciate that, kind of decolonizing a little bit. So I do want to provide some updates. So one body of work that I have been working on is around providing stipends to all advisory groups within the city. The reason that we haven't kept you all in the loop on that is because I think it raises an ethics issue, just talking about ethics at a state level. And so we don't want to have this group advocating for yourselves to receive funds. That is something that council and the city manager has wanted to do. So my department has led the creation of an internal work group that includes legal, HR, the city recorder's office, finance, and council to create a recommendation. So we're hopeful, if everything goes correctly, this is tentative, but starting in April, we'll be providing a stipend of $40 per meeting, and that's not to exceed $600 per person annually. So that official recommendation is being drafted. I will share that with you all just for background information and research that I've done on other jurisdictions who do this work as well, and how we got to that number. And so we do have the funds set aside already to be able to provide this throughout for every advisory body throughout the city. There are 14. And so it'll be everybody gets it unless you opt out. And I can also provide some context around that. So look for more information from me. We are working through a social security number workaround so that members who are not, who don't have social security numbers can still participate. So we'll be having them sign up as vendors so that they can use their TIN number to be able to do that, because we don't want to be creating barriers. And the other updates are around the retreat. So we've been talking a little bit about the retreat. I received some feedback from a number of folks, and I've reached out to a number of facilitators to figure out next steps. My questions are for this group. I'm going to connect with the communication subgroup tomorrow, and then I will be talking about this at the full committee meeting next week, or commission meeting next week. But I'm hopeful that we'll have it in March, and I'm looking at March 19th based off of the facilitator's proposal and what is available. And I'm just hoping that this group can hold that date, please. And my thought is we'll have a 2-part retreat. I've been working with Ian on some discussions around potentially having the first part be closed to the public. We will not be able to talk about HREC business whatsoever. But we will be focusing on team building, communication styles, kind of how we're going to work together and what we each need out of this group. And I'm hopeful that that first half, I would suggest that we have it and not go immediately into the afternoon part of having to then shift to work. I think I want to provide time to digest kind of the team building elements of that. And so this kind of is the beginning stages of that planning. And then if we do want to have it, and I see your hand, Hoon, and I will get to you in 1 second. If we do have it in person, we could take safety precautions. So I could purchase COVID tests. We could each take one. If say it's on a Saturday, we could take one on a Wednesday and then another one the morning of. It's similar to what we do at the city. We just had a leadership retreat and everybody took a COVID test. If you are positive, we can make other arrangements, or we can have a hybrid situation or 100% virtual. But I'll pause there and Hoon, jump in.
Oh, I was just saying March 19th. I already know I have conflict that day. So I don't know exactly, everyone has to participate, how, that's going to be structured. But I already know I have a conflict from 11 to 3. So hopefully more people can do that day, but I know I won't be able to.
I'll connect with you, Hoon. Because this is very beginning stages with identifying a facilitator. And so I'm working with a couple folks that seem to be the date that work the best. I think there's some flexibility, so I can kind of go back to them and then maybe put those options out to the group. That just was the one that worked the best if it were to be in person. So I just wanted to give you all a heads up that planning is in the process. And my hope is that first section will be, again, team building. That second part will focus on the work and creating a work plan and areas of priority. And so then after that, my thought is then at your March meeting, you could potentially be as a full group adopting publicly your action plan. We might need to push that into April depending on scheduling. So I just wanted to give an update on that. And then the last piece for an update that I think is important for this group to know is that as we're rolling out that stipend work, we're also looking at collecting demographic information of our advisory bodies. And so my team is developing a set of supplementarily optional questions to be able to ask folks so that we can use that as we're doing gaps analysis of who is serving on our advisory bodies. And especially as we're rolling out a stipend, I think there will be able to be increased participation. So we want to ensure that we're also being reflective of our values around equity and diversity. So that information will help tell the story of that and identify specific areas that we need to bolster outreach and engagement. And those are my high level updates. We have 2 minutes. Crow, I'll kick it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you for that. The last thing on our agenda is discussion and the next GG subcommittee meeting. The bulk of our work seems to be pretty much done, but I think that there is for sure value in having at least one more meeting to debrief, and potentially if the larger committee requests more from us, if we can't get a vote through or something and they need us to look into something, we might need to just have one on the calendar for those reasons. But otherwise, looking into the future, governance and guidelines doesn't feel like a subcommittee that needs to meet as frequently as it has been to create the document that we've created. Any thoughts about that? There is potential to edit our documents, so I think it is an important subcommittee to have, but maybe not meet every month in the future.
This is Elizabeth. I think in light of what Anna just shared with us about trying to get together for this retreat and work that we're going to do in March, to me, it feels more like if we were to try and come up with some time in April to sort of close the loop on some things and then make decisions about what we're going to do next with this subcommittee, that's what feels best to me.
Yeah, that sounds like a very good natural time. It's potentially after our retreat and after we vote on our document. If that sounds good to the city, maybe schedule one more meeting, and we'll decide from there what we need from our subcommittee going forward. But good work, everybody. I'm super excited. I feel really happy about this meeting and the work we've done so far.
Thank you for your leadership, Crows. Awesome.
Any final comments, discussions before we adjourn today?
No, nice work. Thank you.
Awesome. Everybody enjoy the sunshine. Have a nice day.
See ya.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.